Hello and welcome to FSI the podcast. The much anticipated part 2 of my interview with Kevin Smith is here, and we're going to continue our conversation learning a bit about the mobile embalming units in addition to the training exercise that they have coming up where they will be employing it. So welcome back, Kevin.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Glad to be back for part 2.
Yes, there were quite a few listeners already to part 1. So.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm hopefully I can share some stuff and give them a little insight about things that go on within the military mortuary processes.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about how the idea for the mobile embalming unit came about initially and then into its fruition?
Okay, well, let's start with what is the mobile embalming unit? It's really just a mobile embalming unit. And by that, what we mean is we looked at it and said, hey, if I'm going to have a preparation room, which we're all familiar with, I need to be able to move this anywhere to wherever the need is, as opposed to having just a fixed location. So we think of a funeral home or a mortuary, as a fixed location, that's great. And then you bring the decedents to that location. What do you do whenever you are global and you have limitations on things like refrigerated storage or just transportation? Then you're going to say, well, maybe I need to go, and the closest place to wherever the death is, that's where I need to put a mortuary. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. It's like, if we're going to get into a global war, and who knows who it's with or whatever, it's military, we have to plan for things. And so we're like, well, we don't know where the next war is going to be. And whether it be somewhere in the Pacific or whether it be somewhere in Europe or in the Southwest Asia type area, any of these areas, depending upon where you are. I guess you'd be in Antarctic, although we have pretty good refrigeration in the Antarctic. Anyway, we're looking at what am I going to do if I go into a big war? And you think of kind of like the idea of World War II or World War I, to where you have a large number of fallen and you don't have really good refrigerated storage. So if we ever get into that kind of a war again, we need the ability to go where the fallen are being taken to be able to be prepared to be returned back to the States. When you go into those big wars, World War II, World War I, and the others, going back to history, the plan was always you would have a battlefield cemetery. Well, we pretty much within the United States have determined that all of our fallen are going to be brought home. We've been doing that from Korea to Vietnam to present day. So we're not going out there and doing temporary interment or interment unless it's absolutely required. And that by that I mean like it's a hasty burial and you got to do something and everybody's in an absolute retreat, right? So unless that's a scenario to where you're going to do a hasty burial, our plan is we return the fallen to the rear and then you move them back to stateside for preparation. And in the last, wars that we've had in the last, 40, 50 years, that's been something that we've been able to work. The problem is that if you have a large number, you overwhelm capabilities. And when we're talking about any type of a large scale war, you get into issues of aircraft availability, because, you're out there supporting the troops and stuff like that. So we're looking at all these kind of problems, and we just sat there and said, okay, well, if we want to be able to move, if the need is, we want to be able to plan for the idea that we can move and get as close as possible to preserve the decedents, so that whenever, if we don't have the capability for refrigeration, we know that the remains have been preserved, and then we give ourselves that window of opportunity to be able to then transport them home using whatever means available. The key thing here is that we need to either refrigerate or preserve. And so the idea behind the mobile embalming unit is we may not be able to rely upon refrigeration, especially if we have a large number. If it's a small number, you pretty much, you can. So we're saying, well, what if we have large? And this is, again, we're dealing in what ifs. And with any military, every plan in the military is always based on a what if, right? We don't build a big navy of ships except for the what if we have to use them. Okay, then you have all your ships that are available. Again, all your military aircraft, guns, you name it, whatever the size of your army is, all based on a what if. And so in our field here, we're having to say, well, what if? And so that was our answer to that big what if. And we said, well, is there any other purpose behind the need for a mobile embalming unit? Well, we took a look at, for us within the Air Force, we have a mortuary at Yokota Air Base. We have our mortuary here at Dover Air Force Base. And one of the things that we have to plan is, well, what if something, for whatever reason, we can't operate here? Okay, the building is needing maintenance, which is common, amongst old buildings. You got to have the HVAC system redone, or you got to have the plumbing redone, and it can take you out of the use of your building. They say, well, look, we can't do this because we're going to have to do all this work. You're going to have to shut down. Well, we can't shut down. In my mortuary in Yokota, while we can shut down, then that takes away a lot of capability. And where are those? Especially we see overseas, we deal with a lot of dependents and stuff. So where are those families going to be served? We have to send them to somewhere else. If you're in Japan, the nearest base is either Guam or Korea that we're going to send. If you're in Landstuhl, I mean, in Europe, we only have Landstuhl. So what's happened, because whenever they've had to go down for some kind of maintenance on their structure, they've had to send everybody here, which is fine. We bring everybody here. But it's a little bit more difficult when you're dealing in the Pacific. So we looked at it and said, well, if something happens in AFMAO here at Dover, had to be taken down, where would we go? And we said, well, we identify some bases and we say, okay, we'll go operate out of this base. Well, where on that base are we going to operate? Now, we all know that formaldehyde's a carcinogen. And because it's a carcinogen, we're like, hey, we want a dedicated HVAC, because we consider safety of our own personnel to be paramount. Okay, so we use the powered air respirators, PAPRs. We use those with formaldehyde filters, and we also have ventilation, a good HVAC system. So part of the idea behind the MEU was to serve really two purposes. One was the what if. What if we need to go to the place closest to the battle to be able to do prep, which is something that was last done in Vietnam. We had mortuaries in Vietnam, and the fallen in Vietnam were prepared, embalmed there, and then they were returned through either Travis or Dover Air Force Base, okay, before they were sent on back to their homes for their families. So in that sense, that works. That was a very long war in which we were able to get there, and as it built up, they were able to build those structures. Where do you start from? Well, they started in tents and eventually had physical structures. So we're looking at, if we had to go and do something like this, depending upon where the battle is, how long would it take for me to be operational? Well, I mean, what happened in Vietnam is it slowly ramped up and you built up the capabilities, and that lasted for years. Well, what do we do for the first months to a year? I mean, before I have the time to get there. That's where the mobile embalming unit comes in. It is a dedicated HVAC system. It's standalone. It has water capability for freshwater tanks. It has a wastewater tanks, and it was designed around a 20-foot high top connex. And within that 20-foot high top connex, you have a dedicated HVAC system. You have your standard autopsy embalming sink. So it looks just like your regular, modern prep room. We had everything else done in stainless steel so that we could clean properly the walls and stuff. It also has, in the overhead, it has a lift. So we have a body lift within there. It's got light. It has all the safety items you need, such as the eye wash station, as well as the shower, the drench shower. And then, like I said, it's got that dedicated HVAC system designed specifically for this use, and the water tanks, all that stuff, right? And it's all contained within inside the footprint of this 20-foot connex. So when you go from the outside, it's a standard connex box. There's nothing it can stack. You can stack it within. There's nothing extending out. So everything had to be within that profile. Couldn't have anything external on it. And it uses the doors that exist. So it's a connex with doors on both sides, the standard. So you could open it from either side. So the structure of it, the integrity is contained within that. And then let's see here. The other part of it is I wanted to be very able to go anywhere. So we mandated that it had to be able to hook up to shore power. It had to be able to have wastewater dumping, and I wanted RV style, connections there. And so with all this, that was the idea behind, what the capabilities had, and where the idea came up from, you know, COVID, YouTube, stuff like that. But we also went and visited. One of the things that we did back in 2020, 22, 23 timeframe, whenever we really started moving on this project, was we went to New York City and medical examiner. We had a big briefing with them to be able to see how they operated during COVID. And so we looked at some of the facilities, and the idea here is they had kind of like distribution centers, I guess you call them, right? Where they collected those that had died from COVID. They brought them in. They had refrigerated trucks, tractor trailer trucks. They brought them in there, and it was basically kind of, if you think of a warehouse like Amazon would have, right? You have the loading bays. So they showed us a structure, and we're like, wow, if we had to operate on a large scale, that I would want something like that. And then we're like, well, what about the embalming? Like, the problem we need is the HVAC system dedicated. We need it separated. Again, that was the kind of the idea behind the use of the Connex. Is like, I could take these things, stick them in, give me an empty warehouse, and I could bring these in, and then I could just have them sitting right there at the opening door, like the bay, where a bay is for, where you drive your tractor trailer in there, your reefer truck in there for loading. And I could have it backed up to there, and yet everybody inside. So this thing vents everything outdoors, yet everybody inside there can be without wearing, respirators, and they're doing the rest of the work, whereas the embalming is being done in this unit separate. So seeing what they did there, watching YouTube videos during COVID on just, tiny houses and stuff like that, whenever because I was in Germany during that time, and just looking at that stuff saying, wow. And then whenever I was faced with this, I sat there and thought, hey, I got an idea. Plus, I'd seen something in Germany too when I was there, and this was really key. They were using those things for offices. They were using Connexes for offices over there. And so again, all that, just having seen this before, both on YouTube, but also on the base. There, you can go over there and you will find some areas where it's like, oh, those are Connexes that they've just converted over to office use. And it just absolutely made sense. I mean, there are people that do that to make them out of homes too, using Connex boxes. So it's a thing. And so that was kind of the idea why it's like, wow, if I did that, that means that if I need to deploy this thing, it's really easy to deploy. It's not some other structure. I mean, we consider some other ideas, like I know you can have those offices, those you'll see them around school sometime, where it's like a small prefab home. Portables. They go in there and they pull up. Yeah, what do you call them?
I think they call them portables.
Yeah, portable offices. The only problem with that is I wanted something that could withstand. I wanted something durable, meaning that if I set this thing over in operations, whatever country it is, and then I need to move it really quick, and someone drops it or bangs it around, I want it to have some durability. And that's why I was thinking of the Connex. I was like, well, these things are pretty durable. I mean, you can't drop them from any height and expect them to completely retain their shape. But I wanted something that was fairly structurally sound. I figured, hey, look, if they can stack these things on a ship and move them around with these cranes, moving them on and off a ship or on and off an aircraft, I am pretty confident that when they get to my destination, they're going to be in pretty good shape. I mean, there's no guarantee of anything in the world. But I looked at those other prefab mobile, offices, and I was like, yeah, I don't think it would work in a military environment, especially one where I want something that can go by land, sea, air, rail, whatever it is. I was like, yeah, I want something a little bit more durable. So that's the idea behind the MEU and the use of a Connex, your container box there, to be able to create it out of that. So that's it. Any questions on the MEU?
Funeral directors. Want more consistency, higher family satisfaction, and stronger revenue per call? Meet Arranger from Matthews Technology Solutions, an interactive arrangement system that helps your team present every service and merchandise option, every time. Customize your presentation flow, your packages, and even add videos and documents, then generate digital contracts and streamline paperwork on the spot. The future of the arrangement conference is here. Contact Lisa Valdez. Contact Lisa Valdez at @Andrews, &AuroraCasket.com to schedule your arranger demo today. Again, contact Lisa Valdez at Andrews at AuroraCasket.com to schedule your arranger demo today. Yes, so tell me a little bit about the plumbing, because I thought that was an interesting thing you mentioned. I know in some countries they're very particular about waste from embalming and things of that nature. They're very concerned about what you release back into the environment. So can you elaborate a bit on the plumbing?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's the idea here is that you got a water tank and then you've got a wastewater tank. And with those two tanks there, you can't put any more waste in there than what you had for your water supply. So the idea here is that if we have to, depending on where we're at, we can then just order in and bring in a sewer water, like they do it for septic tank removal, whenever you have to pump your septic tank. And so that would be the idea is that, wherever you're at, you've got a way in which you can dispose of this kind of wastewater. Now, you may not be able to dump it down the drain because, as you mentioned, the countries we may have to hire. And, that, again, that's part of it. Wherever you're going, you look at, okay, what regulations, rules are. So it can be contained until you can get something to pump out. And we even deal with that here at Dover. So we, our whole thing here is that we've got, we're contracting with a septic removal company to come in here and pump out the wastewater and dispose of it, and their concern is, hey, it's got formaldehyde. We're like, look, our backup here is we're physically here. If we have to bucket it, brigade it into the building and dump it down our drains, we know we can dump the stuff down our drains because that's what you do in a regular funeral home. But like you said, depending on where you are, sometimes, those regulations come into play. So if we were in, I don't know, let's say we sent one to Germany, then you would have to contract with a company to go and to remove it. And I'm sure they're going to charge you a pretty penny, but what's your alternative? The only alternative you have in other countries is, if you don't have a physical mortuary, but you have morticians, is going to be that you contract with the civilians. Well, one of the things that we do is different, and you can attest to this, is we embalm completely different than anywhere else in the country, in the world. All right, our standard, even for our just regular funeral home, not counting DoD standards, are embalming at a different level than anybody else. Okay, so they don't see the preservation of remains quite the same way that we do. So we use a lot more chemicals in embalming, and then whenever you get into the military, our DoD standards, we are embalming for long-term preservation, not short-term. So we're a lot of fluid, and of course that means that you have a lot of formaldehyde in your wastewater as well. So that can be a problem depending on where you are. Now, if you're in a war zone, it's not going to be probably quite such a big problem, but it is still a concern. So something you have to do, but you would have to do that if you set up a physical mortuary anywhere. No matter where you are, that's one of the issues you're going to have to do is what do you do with the wastewater and how do you get rid of it? But they've got the onboard tanks. And again, for these tanks here that we've got right now, I think it's 275 gallons fresh water and 275 gallons wastewater capability, plus the additional, which is for your drenched shower that you have. So with those capabilities, as far as that, it all depends upon how much water you use. I mean, obviously with embalming, we're not going to sit there with the flow just going. We're going to wash the remains, use the minimal amount of water we can to wash the decedents, and the minimal amount of water that we're going to put into the drain as much as possible. So depending if we can get it down to a usage of say 10 gallons per HR, that's our goal. Then we're looking at being able to do roughly 27 remains before we have to have our dump, and that's kind of what we're targeting now. Again, depending on what's going on, you may or may not, use as much of that. If you can use less than the 10 gallons, great. But I mean, keep in mind, you are mixing, part of that 10 gallons is what you're injecting, right? And then what's coming out as well is going to go into your drain, and then you have to wash the decedent. So, we're anywhere usually 4 or 5 gallons is what you're going to be using. The requirements, DoD standards is 1 gallon of fluid dilution per 50 pounds of body weight. So if you got a 200-pound airman or soldier, Marine, sailor, you're looking at 4 gallons minimal that you are supposed to be injecting in whenever you are injecting per DoD standards.
Okay, and how are the MEUs sourced or powered? Where do you get your electricity from?
Again, it can be, it's really to run the HVAC system. So they come equipped with a tri-fuel generator. So that's part of the procurement. And then, of course, you can hook them up to minimal 50 amp, connection. Again, kind of like you would a regular RV for shore power is what we're looking at.
So and you have how many embalming stations in it?
It's one. It's literally one. It's tight. I mean, when you actually look at these, and you can, when you look at these things, you go into the one side. You have enough room on either side to be standing in there, but the interior of a Connex is, I mean, they're like 8 foot, but whenever you put insulation in the walls in here, you're 7.5 at the most, so it's a little over 7 foot. So these are not wide, and they're, I mean, it's again, this isn't a large footprint that we're talking about. This whole idea is that it's mobile. I can stick it anywhere, and I can go inside there and embalm. That's all you're doing in there is embalming. Now you remove the remains out of there and take them to another area where you can do this with a tent, or if you're in a large hangar or something like that, that's where you would go in there for the rest of the preparation, dressing, and everything else that you would do. But the idea behind the MEU is specific really to the biggest concern is the HVAC system is really the getting rid and separating the formaldehyde from everybody else that's involved in this. You can go and use a regular shelter. You could use a tent, and you can bring in a bunch of fans in there. If you're in the tropics, that's a problem. Think about it. If you're just in tents and it's 100 degrees outside and you're in a tent, well, you're air conditioning it, but you're having to exhaust the formaldehyde, which means you're having to bring fresh air. I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, because your air conditioning usually is a recirculation, right? It takes the air, it dries it out and goes in there. But if you are bringing in humid air and air conditioning it, and then you're exhausting, you are creating a heavy load in there to be able to do this and be able to control that. And even in our large facility that we have our preparation embalming room is 10 stations. And it's a big room, and it is, no matter how many times they come in here and they try to fix our HVAC, if you do a smoke test, it just circulates in there. You cannot be in there without a respirator because it just can't suck out enough. When you look at the MEU with a dedicated HVAC system, you close that off, it's going to suck everything out, and then it's going to be bringing in fresh air, but it's in a much smaller area. So again, the idea here is that these things set to where the door opening where you enter it would be right there at either it could be attached to a tent or another, building. But the back part of it where it exhausts out is outdoors. So all that formaldehyde is not going to be in there, where the rest of the team is going to be working and doing the other preparation work.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit about your plans to give it a test drive?
We are coming up. There's an annual exercise held up in Michigan. They call it Northern Strike. And they do a bunch of things. One of the things is that the Mortuary Affairs community, they go up there, and that's where they exercise, and they bring people from all the branches of services, sometimes people from other countries, depending upon whether it's a focus on the Pacific or European theaters. And they bring everybody in there, and they go out there, and they do search and recovery exercises, stuff like that. And for the last year, we have the use of cadavers. Okay, so we actually have human remains folks that have donated themselves to the use for exactly this purpose. And we bring in, it's not just from mortuary, but we have our medical teams that go out there, and they get first use of the remains, so they're able to go in there and practice life-saving measures, and get exposure, which is really valuable for people in this field that don't work in hospitals, don't work in funeral homes, that have to do this in the war, is to get them that initial exposure so that they face death before they're really facing it. And by that, I mean that they now have exposure there. It kind of, how it is for everybody. First time you go in there and you have to work with a dead body, it's a little bit unsettling. And ideally for these folks, it gives them the ability to go in there and to get some exposure in that in a controlled setting. And the cadavers that are used, the company, their reps are there, so they make sure that these folks are being treated with dignity, honor, respect, because they are not, they're there for a specific purpose, and it is to train the troops so that everybody gets this experience. So when the medical team is done, then they're using them for search and recovery. And then the teams that have to go out there in the field and they have to do search and recovery, they utilize cadaver dogs, so they'll go out and place them in different places in fields, and then they go out there and recover them. And the remains aren't left outdoors very long because obviously we don't want to have anything negative to happen to them, but they're left in the field long enough for the cadaver dogs and stuff to be able to go and locate them, or the regular search and recovery team to go out there and find them. And then they do the recovery just like they would if they were in a battlefield, and they bring them in and process at like a mortuary affairs collection point. And then after that, then they bring them over to the mortuary. So for the expeditionary mortuary operations, and that's where we use these cadavers, and we are going through a process of, if we were in a large scale combat operations and you had a large number of decedents, and we needed to be able to get them preserved as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. So, one of the things that comes up in our profession as embalmers, we all know that there's no families ever said, "Oh, how quickly can you embalm my loved one?" That just doesn't happen, right? And we know that. Our whole goal here is preservation, sanitation, but also is for the family to be able to see their loved one. So we have to take our time and care on those aspects. And yet there is a certain amount of time that we can go, as far as, nobody's going to say, "Oh, go in here and take a regular case and spend 10 hours on it," because we know it doesn't take 10 hours to do it. But at the same time, whenever you're embalming and you're doing restoration for someone, we do not tell our DoD embalmers that there is a time limit on the restorative arts process, meaning that if we need 10 hours to, fix trauma on a face and to try to make someone ready, viewable to go home, then that's what we're going to do. But when we're in the expeditionary mortuary operations, we say this. Our goal here is this. If someone is potentially viewable, meaning that they are not in a state of decomposition or the trauma was not so severe, then in that case here, my embalmer's focus is on preservation and basic feature setting, meaning that we want to close the mouth, close the eyes, pose the hands, make sure that they're bathed and that they are preserved. But any follow-on restoration will be done at the receiving port once they get back to the CONUS. So then we will take them, and it's kind of like a ship out, right? If you're going to do it just a basic ship out, hey, I'm going to take someone, I'm going to get them embalmed, they're preserved. Now the receiving funeral home can then finish up and do it. And so understanding that, we say, okay, we've got a set time, because if you have a large number of decedents, I need to know for planning purposes, how many mobile embalming units, how many embalmers do I need? Mm-hmm. The only way I'm going to know that is I've got to have a time. And so what we did was we said, okay, if there are viewable remains, we have targeted a time of 1 hour for embalming, which, again, setting features, they're not autopsy, viewable decedents. We give the embalmer 1 hour, and then they come out of the mobile embalming unit or the embalming suite, depending on how you're structured. And then they would go into the next station, which is where they would finish off with bathing them and then giving them dressing them in plastic coveralls, for then placement in, say, a transfer case or a Ziegler case for storage and then return back, on the next available transportation means, right? And again, keeping in mind, we're looking at this if we give a large number. So if you go back to World War II, and anybody that's a history buff, you look at any of the battles where you had literally thousands. Imagine this, and you are now, hey, we went into some big battle, and you're telling me that, hey, we're going to be bringing over the next 10 days, you're going to be bringing in hundreds per day. I don't have time to lollygag around. I don't have time to say, oh, okay, get to it. And, if you can embalm 1-2 hours, I need to know how quickly can I get, because I'm trying to preserve the fallen so that they can be viewable. And if you get large numbers of decedents coming in, you've got to triage and say, who is still not in a state of decomposition to where I'm not going to be able to make them viewable, right? In other words, we have categories for that. We have viewable for identification, and with head wrap, and a full body wrap in what we call the non-view. And the full body wrap is a way in which we can preserve the remains and send them home in a wrapped condition so that when you open the casket, there's no odor coming out, right? And that's what we do for those remains in severe trauma or state of decomposition. But if you have hundreds or even thousands coming in, I have got to tell my embalmers, embalm, set features, get them embalmed, get to the next one. So we identified this and said, okay, if I was in this kind of operation, I'm going to be in a 24-hour operation. So in that, I'm like, all right, so how many can I possibly do viewable in a 24-hour period? And factoring in everything, look at it and say, okay, if I give the embalmers 1 hour, I've got to give embalmers breaks. You got to have bathroom breaks. You got to have a lunch break. I've got to have time to set my station up, everything. And so ran a schedule with it. And what we're going to do at Northern Strike here, and this is what we call rapid embalming, we are going to be exercising this so the embalmer has 1 hour. And then they're going to set up and reset their station and do the next one. When you project this out over a 24-hour period, we estimate we can, at each embalming station, we can get at least 16 decedents embalmed in a 24-hour period. Now, if they're not viewable, we, assuming now they're not viewable, we do what's called, we have the same thing, rapid embalming. We're still setting the features, posing the hands. But one of the things that we're also doing, we're injecting, we are also using hypodermic, infant trocars, and we start with the feet and we start preserving. And we're using cavity fluid straight in there, because now with the non-viewable remains, our only concern is to stop the decomposition so that we can wrap the remains and be able to return them home, because these are not viewable decedents. So we've cut that down to about 30 minutes, and we exercised that last year, and you can do it. Now, again, keep in mind, this is only something we implore in this combat situation where we have the numbers that we're projecting out, where if we had literally hundreds coming in per day or whatever, how quickly can we possibly do it? We're going to, beyond that, that's pretty much the max. And we demonstrated that you can do that in as quick as 30 minutes for non-viewable remains. And I think it's reasonable to expect viewable remains in 1 hour, because I know so many embalmers have bragged about, I can do someone in an hour. I've never bragged on that, never really tried to do it. But in the combat situations where we're like, okay, we're going to go as fast as we can because there's a need, because I need to get to the next one. And I have limited refrigeration. That is where it is. Now, because of where I am and everything, just for, and this is really important for anybody listening to this, this is not how we operate here at Dover. When they come in here in Dover, we have plenty of refrigeration. We have that capability to take our time here, and we focus, and our priority here is viewability and making sure that the fallen can go home viewable when and where possible. We don't put a premium on how fast we can go, except in the sense of that we get our job done and try to get everybody done today, because everybody that I can do today and don't have to push till tomorrow means that that family gets their loved one home 1 day sooner. That's about the only thing we do, and we never put a priority on getting someone out versus their viewability. So if an embalmer says, hey, I've got a lot of restoration work on this one, then they're going to do the restoration work. And if that means we pay overtime, we pay overtime. But in our rapid embalming, this combat theater type embalming, our priority here is preservation and sanitation, with the idea that all restoration work comes at the receiving CONUS mortuary. So I just want to really be clear, because I don't want there to be any misconceptions. What we do here at Dover is not what we are exercising. Our plan on exercising is to try to get, if we were ever faced with it, the ability to process as quickly as possible and embalm and preserve and sanitize as many as possible, so that the greatest chance of someone being able to open a casket and still seeing their loved one there exists. And there's just no other way you can do it, because, again, we don't know what we have until we have it, and we have to be prepared for anything. So with this, we can sit there and look and say, okay, if I can do 24 non-viewable remains in a 24-hour period, and if I can do 16 viewable remains in a 24-hour period, now in my equation, all I need to know is how many embalming stations do I need, and how many embalmers do I need. And that's what our purpose and what we are doing for this exercise is, to make sure that we have codified and documented these capabilities, so that should the need ever arise next year, 10 years, whenever it is, we have done this work, and we can say, okay, this is what it's going to take. If you tell me if we ever face World War II again, and they're like, okay, we're fighting, the World War II again, right? If we are ever facing that again, and they said, okay, well, what do you need to do? Then I'm going to be able to say, okay, this is what I need. I'm going to need this many embalming stations. Tell me what your casualty rate you expect. And now, based upon your casualty rate, I can sit there and project what I'm going to need to put into that theater to be able to embalm and preserve as many of the fallen as possible in as quick a time as possible.
What's interesting too about that is, and I know it's apples and oranges when you compare it to the preparation process in the civilian sector, right? Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is, for those of us that were working during COVID, that were trying to prepare folks and do services and things like that in a high volume situation, like, I know that your training exercise is like next level. So for a civilian practitioner, if they can recall the amount of work and pressure and all that was involved during the COVID timeframe in the civilian world, imagine that like multiplied during a conflict time where you have that type of volume. So I think it's really fascinating. And when did you say the training exercise is going to take place?
They take it's every year. It's held up in Michigan, in the Michigan Peninsula there. Go east of Traverse City, Camp Grayling, and it's held every year in August.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll share your results a bit like last year, like when we were able to kind of get an idea of how things went, and hopefully that new embalming unit will serve you very well.
Well, we're hoping we have great hope for it. But again, it's just one instrument in a tool bag. And the biggest thing for us is not just the idea of using it to go somewhere for the combat support. We're also looking at it because our mortuary Yokota is going to have its HVAC system redone. And we don't want to be dependent and be able to shut down for the families that we serve at Yokota, because that mortuary there at Yokota, it does a lot for the family members, the dependents. There's a large retiree population. Same thing you have over in Europe, with Landstuhl supporting there. I mean, a lot of our CONUS DoD mortuaries are supporting our family members that are out there, because, the families traveled with the military members. So to lose that capability in a place like Japan, where there's a large military footprint, or Korea or Germany, that's hard, because then it forces the family members, their ability to use our mortuary is a privilege, not a right. And that's different. Now, the active duty members, stuff like that, it's a right. And so we have to do that. But we extend that benefit to all of our military members, and even the retiree population, can use us on a reimbursable basis. So, we don't like to have just a single capabilities. And when you are the only CONUS based port mortuary in the DoD, the idea that if something happens to my building, that we don't have our capability to continue operation is not acceptable. So the MEU gives us, we know that should something happen and we have to move for any reason, our location for any length of time, that we just pack up our MEU and supplies, and we can go to another base and say, hey, give me some hangar space. And we can at least operate at least a basic minimal basic level, not to the extent like we said we have 10 embalming stations plus some overflow capability and some other stations in another section. So we have a lot of capability here to be able to support. So one MEU doesn't completely make up for the entire port mortuary, but it means that, on our day-to-day operations, we're not going to shut down completely if we had to bug out for some reason.
I think too, it provides a lot of guidance and potentially a blueprint for like emergency response on a state level, or even if you own a funeral home and you are going to have that downtime. Imagine if you could potentially rent an MEU for a particular period of time. Like if you had it available, you could use it for that 3 months. You're not purchasing it necessarily, so that you're able to complete any renovations or repairs you need to. Like the possibilities with its use are endless. And I think it's really interesting. So I'm going to keep an eye on your outcomes with the training exercise, and also for the practitioners in the civilian sector, take note of these things, because this could potentially be a solution for when we do have those emergency situations. Where this could be an option to have you continue operating, when you are faced with things that could potentially shut down.
Absolutely. If you go into any kind of a large national disaster or something like that, there's funeral homes, and there's a lot of funeral homes with capability. So, how much would get deployed stateside? I don't really know, but I'm sure that its use for funeral homes that are undergoing repairs, or somewhere where they need to have that capability really quickly, some rural area to where you have a mass fatality. It may really be valuable in places like that. And especially whenever you're looking at for a response to a natural disaster, say in another country, or we have the Virgin Islands, you have places like Haiti, you have other places like that to where, these things have a capability for anybody to be able to go in here. And again, the biggest thing is we all know that you can go in and embalm anywhere. Give me a sink or something like that. People have been embalming for days in houses. This is 2026, and we all know that formaldehyde is a carcinogen. And so the idea behind the MEU is really to create a safe place for the embalmer to work. A safe, clean place, and the design of it is inside the embalming suite. For us, it's all stainless steel. Now, you could do it with less than stainless steel because it is a very heavy unit. It's like 11,000 pounds.
Wow.
So it's not light, okay? But having said that, the idea is that you go into this and it's just all stainless steel. And that whole idea was that I wanted something that was easily cleanable and durable. And again, so. All right.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know you all are busy. They're at the nation's mortuary, and for you to share this information and insight is really helpful and much appreciated.
You got it. Anytime.
Thank you so much. So you all have been listening to Funeral Service Insider, the podcast. I will have some information for you in the show notes. And I appreciate Mr. Smith making the time, and we will keep an eye on how that training exercise goes.